In 2016, I was in New York City, had a thing called the Better Men Conference.
Better Man Conference. Yeah.
Yes. Created by Ray Arata. Right? And so corporate sponsorship in a nice space, movie screening, house full of people milling around. Hey, who are you? Sean, da-da-da-da-da-da. I've been up in Wendell doing shadow work at Joe Lauer's house. I worked for Eileen Fisher doing shadow work with people in who the fuck are you, dude? And that was our first conversation.
And I would say, hey, Boyson, I did my men's work through the feminine at Eileen Fisher. And that's where we met. And then we met in the middle.
Since then, I've been connected to Sean. Sean and I talk probably every month or every 2 months.
Yeah, every month at this point.
And I have watched the progression of what he's done and what he's doing. And I thought that this was a beautiful closing to be thinking about some 3 key faiths in our guiding principles. This is Sean Harvey.
All right, well, thank you. Can you all hear me? Yes. All right. So, this was my speech. After hearing y'all, this is now my speech. All right, so, before we get into it, the Eileen Fisher way is embedded in my DNA. And one of the things that we would do in every meeting, we had Tibetan singing bowls in every conference room. And so for those of you that know, we're going to do, if we could just do a moment of silence, just to come into our collective energy, give me a moment to breathe, come into my center, our center, and then we'll get into it. Cool? All right. So close your eyes, lower your gaze, whatever's most comfortable for you. Just take a deep breath in. Breathe out. Take another breath. Breathe out. I'm going to chime us in and chime us out of silence. Let's just be in the silence together. When you're ready, come back into the space. Okay. So while I joke with Boyson that I did my men's work to the feminine, I did my weekend in December 2019. It was a gateway weekend for the LGBTQ community. And I'd done a lot of work. So the thing that just struck me the most, hit me in the gut, hit me in the heart, was the sexual shadow hour. And I was in seminary at the time, because when I came into this work, I said, if we're going to do work with men, we have to do it at the soul level. So I went to seminary to get the grounding at the spiritual level to do the work at the soul level with the men that I reach. So
Sean?
Yeah?
So some of us are right beneath the register, it's loud.
Okay, so you can't hear me?
Yeah, I'm having difficulty.
Okay, so louder?
Please.
Okay. So, I was in seminary. I had to do a worship service. And I think I was probably the first person to do a worship service where all the men got naked.
Yeah.
But what we talked about was how do we untether love, sex, and intimacy as men? And from that place, for men who don't do the work, the way I say it is, it's often the intimacy that we yearn for, the love we misunderstand, and the sex that we settle for. So what I want to talk about today is that middle piece, the love we misunderstand. So I've heard a lot of we connect, we love, but it's a very complicated thing. There's not a universal understanding of what love is. So I want to ground us in just this conversation that whatever we talk about in bridging divides, how do we work and see the humanity in the other? How do we do this from love? So a little bit of my journey. So I was a precocious teenager. Came out of 15. Started the first gay and lesbian youth group for the city of Dayton, Ohio at 16. In 1989. So some of y'all did your men's work. I was doing my own version of men's work in the gay community. That organization now still exists 37 years later, serving all of Southwest Ohio, from Columbus to Cincinnati to the Indiana border. So I went from that, got my degrees, went to Wall Street, was a consultant on Wall Street. On my 40th birthday, I'd had enough. So I went into my CEO's office and I said, I've lost my heart and soul in my job. I'm tired of trying to create miracles in 2-hour intervals. Some of you know what I mean. And I resigned as my birthday present. Within 2 weeks, an opportunity came along at this little company called Eileen Fisher. Some of the women some of the men know what their wives have paid for at Eileen Fisher, a $500 sweater. So I went on an 8-month interview process. On the day that I got the job, my 2 bosses sat me down and they said these words: Sean, you have proven yourself for the interview process. We now want you to stop proving yourself and learn how to be who you actually are. When you interviewed with us, you showed us your polish and you showed us your heart. We hired you for your heart and we want to see less of your polish. We don't care about your degrees, your accomplishments, your achievements. Now, first of all, how many of y'all know of any company that would say that to you? And for the men, how many of you would have heard that? And what that was for me was permission. It was permission to go on my path. Now, I eventually became the head of personal transformation and well-being for the company. So we're taking all employees through shadow work, limiting beliefs work, ego relaxation, spirituality in the workplace. I actually wrote an article for the Journal of Management, Spirituality, and Religion on spirituality at work. What is the soul of the company? We asked employees, and they said, well, it's Eileen, of course. She believes in the deep intuitive knowing more than empirically based data. She built a $500 million company on intuition. So I'm like taking all this in, and I'm noticing I'm changing. I'm noticing other guys are changing. Like, hey, how you changing? They would say, you usually start like this. Well, my wife said, I listen differently. I'm more patient. I stopped needing to be right all the time. I started to be more curious. Started to have more access to my emotions. Started to have more access to tap into my creativity. And I was solving problems differently. But what every guy would say is, and I'm more comfortable in my own skin. Now the reality is, they didn't even know they were doing the work. The system and the feminine leadership were all transforming these men in ways that they didn't even realize. I said, we got to bottle this up and take it out in the world. Now, Eileen Fisher also sent me to an artist commune in Canada for 5 months, as one does.
Typical career path.
Yeah, typical, right? And that's where I got the call to work with men. Now, I didn't want to work with men. I left Wall Street to never work with men again. So that's when I realized if oppressive systems are crumbling around us, We need to reimagine them from deeper consciousness and collective wisdom, not rebuilding them on outdated models. And so what is the Achilles?
That last part again? Not rebuilding them with what?
On outdated models.
Could you repeat that whole statement, please?
Yeah. So if we are going to, we need to reimagine from deeper consciousness and collective wisdom a new way to reimagine organizational systems, not from rebuilding outdated models. So when I looked at it, I was like, well, what's the Achilles heel? Typically men in power, holding on to power from wounding, not healing. So what if we brought healing into those systems? So, and that's when I knew this is soul healing work. Went to seminary, did my weekend. From my weekend, did my worship service. Guys getting naked, hanging out. My dean in seminary is like, what is this? I'm like, it's men's work. I'm a precocious one. So, graduate seminary. 2 days after saying my vows, I get a call. And I decided to move from Spanish Harlem, New York to West Asheville, North Carolina. 2 days after saying my vows, and I had made this decision 3 weeks before graduating seminary. When I said my vows, 2 days later, I get a video. And it is the chief of police of the Asheville Police Department. They had come in militarized at a Black Lives Matter protest. They had destroyed a medic tent and made national news. This video was a mea culpa. I screwed up, we screwed up, we're reforming the department. Any members of the community, you can come and be part of police reform efforts. So in seminary, they say, when you hear the call, you say yes no matter what, even if you don't think you're qualified. Didn't know anything about cops. Now I do, I didn't then. So I emailed him, and I said, this is how I open. I'm moving from Spanish Harlem, New York, to West Asheville, North Carolina. My best friend in London, who's mixed race, will visit me in New York, but won't visit me in Asheville because he's afraid of being murdered by your police. And that was the opening. That led to a one-on-one with the chief of police. And he had two asks. Can you deepen the level of compassion among my officers? And can you create conversations between officers and community members that humanize each other for a new relationship going forward? I said yes, but they lost 80 officers to retirements and resignations in 6 months. They didn't have bandwidth. Somehow the universe said, well, if you're gonna do this, we're just gonna give you the opportunity. And we brought 6 people together and we formed Project Compassion, a national initiative to deepen compassion in police departments. Now there's one guy on the team who I was like, oh, we're gonna butt heads. That was the former head of the FBI National Academy. This is my, so he's on our team. He asserts a lot. He likes to tell us how we're gonna do it. So I said, all right, I'm just gonna reach out to this guy and say, hey, let's just have a conversation. So I thought we were gonna have a 20-minute conversation. We had a 2.5-hour conversation. He kept me on the phone and asked question after question. And I'm talking Eileen Fisher, I'm talking artist communes, I'm gonna help your cops get in touch with their feminine. And he just keeps on going. At the end of the conversation, he said these words, Sean, I cannot argue, refute, or rebut anything you've just told me. You are not talking about training cops to be better cops. You're talking about developing officers into better humans. Who can argue with that? So I started working with cops, then I started working with military, then I started meeting white nationalists, and I started meeting neo-Nazis, and I realized I have this weird ability to connect, relate, and invite them into a conversation. So, gay dude works with neo-Nazis. That's kind of what I do. Recently, I just went to neo-Nazi de-radicalization training in Pittsburgh. So the journey took me from New York to Asheville. I got the call to move to Washington, D.C. on January 6th. Wow. 2 months later, I'm in D.C. And there I realized I was meant to work in the most hyper-masculine systems on the planet. Got the connections I needed, and then I got the call to move to Philly. Pennsylvania, if you don't know, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, has the third highest rate of hate activity in the country. California number 1 because of its size, Florida number 2, Pennsylvania number 3, and then Texas, and then Georgia. So a lot of work is being done across the state of Pennsylvania around what do we do around counter-extremism. And somehow things have evolved. I'm now a fellow at American University. I teach men, masculinity, and extremism. And I look at the psychological drivers and conditions that move men into extremist violence. And what do we do to prevent that? So as I look at it, in the work that, when we look at some of the drivers, some of it's faulty and outdated teachings. Some of it's toxic conditioning. Some of it's untouched grief, unresolved grievance. And a whole heck of a lot of it is deep-seated fear. And a lot of shame. So what is the opportunity for men's work to create the connection that we talk about, but also the courage to be able to reach the guys that we would say I would never reach out to? Because those guys are hungry and those guys are yearning. And the reality is all guys are hungry, all guys are yearning. I remember I was in a conversation and someone said, fight the fascists, not each other. I said, but my guys tend to be the fascists in your world. So how do we bring compassion to those guys? So if we're going to say we're going to reach all men, we're not just reaching the men we're most comfortable with, but we're leaning into our own courage to build bridges from compassion and from love. So when I started, and we're really solidified. After the Uvalde shooting, our team had a meeting with Senator Durbin on the Judiciary Committee, his staffers. In 30 minutes, we talked about men's mental health, mass shootings, gun violence, police shootings, police suicides, and veteran suicides. I said, that's a fuckload of, that's a lot of hopelessness, right? And so the other part of it is, what is that line when men lose hope? And what is that line when men feel like they don't matter? And that, I think, is where the connection piece comes in your guiding principles. How do you bring that place of having guys feel like they matter? Having guys feel like they belong? And a lot of times guys don't want to belong until they realize that it's safe enough and it's non-threatening enough to be able to belong. So, you know, we're talking about love. And I think I often call this the inquiry. And my hope when I work with folks is you're going to have more questions than answers. And people ask me, what's healthy masculinity? I'm like, I don't know. Who am I to tell you what that is? But you best believe I'm going to ask you the questions to get underneath the protective layers for you to come up with your own truth. And I find that cop after cop after cop after cop says, I can get into that. I'm curious. Tell me more about the work you do. Military guys. And even I'll tell the story of a 40-year-old dude in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, wants to be the face of the white power movement. So, I don't know how I meet these guys. They just find me. And then usually I'm like, oh, this is the conversation we're going to have. Okay. So, start understanding where he's coming from. And then what I envision as we're getting in the conversation was I have a table in front of me. I said, all right, brother, I can hold your hate. Tell me everything you hate and everyone you hate and how you hate. For 25 minutes, he told me who he hated, how he hated, what he hated. And when I was done, I was like, okay, phew, that's a lot. And I said to him, now I have one question for you. What's in your heart right now? Where's the love? Where's the fear? Where's the hate? He said, I don't have any hate. Oh yeah? Let's go back over the last 25 minutes. Oh yeah, I might have some hate. And I said, let's focus on that. What is that about? Where did that come from? What is that doing for you? What is that taking away from you? And often I go from a good, right, bad, right, good, good, bad, right, wrong, to cost benefit. How has this benefited you? But more importantly, what does it cost you? And what do you not have in your life that you're yearning for because you're holding on to hate? And that usually opens the conversation. So the dude kept coming back to me. I'm like, why are you coming? You know where I stand on things? Why do you keep coming back? He's like, I like how you think. And so when we say we have to dumb it down, I think we have to rise it up. Right? I think I was just at a gay Republicans dinner. I'm somewhere in the middle. Doesn't really matter. I was the least educated man in that group. All the PhDs. I was like, I just have a lowly couple of masters. But it was really interesting to get into some of the conversations and where the intellectual rigor was and how we went head to head, toe to toe, and also where the belief systems and ideology was coming in. And regardless of where we are, ideological differences on both sides. So it's not just dedicated to one side or another. And violence is on both sides. And so the opportunity is, when we're holding on to hate, how do we bring love? And so my whole mission, I talked yesterday, my mission is humanizing systems to engage men. But my sole mission is to bring love to hate. And what happens when we bring love to hate? What can that transform? How can that impact? And I call this work the hype effect. Hate, isolation, polarization, and extremism. The hype effect on men. Now it's capital H, capital P, capital E, lowercase I. Because it's the isolation that's often the breeding ground for hate, polarization, extremism. So what are we doing to create that connection? But I want to challenge that idea of connection. Because are we doing connection from comfort? From shadow? From transaction? Are we really doing it from love? Can I really see the humanity in you? Am I challenging myself to see your humanity? Am I asking for you to see mine? So, I'm doing on time. All right, 2 more minutes. You know, I think when we connected to your guiding principles of leadership, connection, service. Connection we've talked about. How do you bring love into those connections in authentic ways? In terms of leadership, what I would add to the mix, 2 things. How do you have the moral courage to step into the uncomfortable? And 2, the one thing I noticed that was missing was flexibility. Where is the flexibility to evolve with where society is evolving so that you can meet the need of where society is without being in rigidity of models and concepts and tools and techniques, which is often the old, outdated way that we've been thinking across the board universally. And then service. When you step beyond your comfort zone, that is an act of service. That is an act of love. That is what can move the needle. And where you can start to have the unexpected conversations, the unexpected connections, and the unexpected transformations. And I often say this work is no different across the political spectrum. It's the invitation that needs to be nuanced so that guys can hear. I was in a room with agencies from across Pennsylvania, and I said, they're like, what are the wins? What are the best practices? What are the challenges? And I said, for the challenge, I do meta masculinity work. For many of you, this is conceptual. I need your help to make it concrete and accessible for the men of Pennsylvania. How do we reach and engage the hardest to reach men and the hardest to access systems? When we can reach those men and create new models, and the reality is we can reach men across the continuum. And my saying is always cop tested, corporate approved. If I can do this with cops, any corporate CEO will be like, well, if you can do it with cops, you can do it with us. That's where I'm going to leave it. Cop tested, corporate approved. How do we transform systems? How do we bring love to hate? So what I want to do now is, for those of you that have to go, I'm done talking. What I want to do is just have you have some conversations. Now the room setup's a little different than I thought it was going to be. So what I'd like you to do is find a partner. And these are 3 questions. 3 questions I want you to ponder. For yourself, how do I love? For your mission, I heard many missions. How are you willing to flex your mission to meet the moment? How are you willing to flex how does your mission flex to meet the moment? And one of the other things I noticed, there are a few seeds here of young men in the audience, right? How do you stretch yourself to engage young men in a way they can hear, not the way you think they hear you?
Thank you.
Could you repeat that last one?
How do you stretch the way you engage young men to the way they can hear you rather than the way you think they hear you? Will you take a few minutes?
Repeat all 3 questions.
Yeah. So the first question, how do I love? First question, how do I love? Second question, how might my mission flex to meet the current moment? And third, how do I stretch the way I engage to young men in a way that they can hear, not the way that I think they hear? We'll take about 15 minutes, have some conversations, and then we'll close it up. So for the last 15 minutes that we have together, just want to create now some space to just debrief either what was coming up from the conversation that you had with your partner or partners, or anything that was sparked by anything I said you just want to kind of bring into the space.
I want to just say something. Some of you guys know Stan Goss from Texas. And I was thinking about Stan during what you're talking. Stan and I are probably 180 degrees from each other politically. We're probably 180 degrees from each other in terms of spiritual and religious beliefs and so forth. But it's the damnedest thing. We can't stop loving each other. So our primary mantra is love matters more. And we just keep repeating that to each other, even when I think he's out of his fucking mind, the way they're doing is fucking dangerous, or he thinks I'm out of my fucking mind, I've gone off the fucking deep end. We look at each other and we continue to love it. If he was right here and some man needed help, he and I would go shoulder to shoulder and do that work. So there's a sense of the bridge in there. I'm so glad you are here and talking about this, and the conversation we had a couple days ago, the how can we build the bridge? Because when I got into this work, the mantra was the next man. Who's the next man? Who's the next man? We didn't ask what his political orientation was, his religious orientation, his sexual or gender orientation, or who he liked to go to bed with, or any of that. It's just who's the next man. And I've never been completely a believer in keeping politics out of it. But how can we bring all of our politics into it, still love each other powerfully? There's an old saying, it says any rabbi whose congregation does not want to drive him out of town is no rabbi. And if you let somebody driven out of town, he is no man. So, in other words, confront each other, which means face without flinching. Tell the truth from all our sides and stay in relationship.
And steep it in love.
What?
And steep it in
And
love.
steep it in love. Keep the love flowing. So, anyway, thank you.
Can you stand up?
I just find that looking at this as a mission, as opposed just to, how will I talk to this young guy? He's whatever he has to say. I'm curious, but not to make it a mission to really think of how do we love as a real thing to pay attention to. How are we coming across? Are we judgmental? What are we bringing to the party? Rather than making it a very casual, oh yeah, I like people, I'm not judging other likes. Thinking it's something that's concrete.
I get the best compliment of the whole weekend. Because of my ADHD, I judge that I'm all over the place, but with the 10% of my brain that's still operating, I hear. And I do follow and I do listen. But I don't always acknowledge it. And my partner said, my conception of you, because I also have ADHD, is that you is very... I don't think I've ever been told that. Miracles.
Okay.
I was talking to Gail, and she didn't really ask the initial questions that you had, but she asked me, my father and the meds work, and my mother and therapy, how that's affected me as I've grown up. And one of the things that I was expressing is that even though the relationships with my parents have grown and evolved as they've learned more, there's always more to be done and more love to find and more to grow. And one of my feelings about last night is being non-political is political. And it is a privilege that not everybody in this room gets to have. And in a space full of where we allow one another to grow and to learn and to be accepted, that's not a place for exclusion, regardless of what your own personal beliefs are. It's a space for love. And that is one of the things that I hope everybody takes forward from this weekend. So.
Yeah, one of the things I think is so important with speaking to young people is not worrying about how you're going to translate it to their way of talking, but it's actively listening and modeling so that they see in you, oh, wow, this guy has what masculinity used to be, the good parts, and what it's becoming. And focus more on that than the words you're using to talk to BLPP. And I think that way we can make some progress.
I just moved here, for those of you who don't know, and I'm all about community building, and I happen to have the blessing to be starting this young men's group with young men. And I have 33 years of men's work in front of me, so it's really easy for me to, when I'm experienced in something, to know how to do it, right? So what I got from this is maybe ask more questions and bring the energy of the magician and flexibility rather than this is how it's done. Because I don't know what's best for these young men, I don't know what it's like to be a 30-something now. So thank you, because I want to create a thriving, vibrant, diverse community here in the Southwest. That's one of my goals. And if anybody has any impacts, any feedback for me about this local area, history, groups, anything like that, I'm about creating this area, recreating this again. So thank you.
So years ago, my husband and I went to a workshop, Growing Yourself Back Up. And the facilitator was saying the most loving, kind thing that you could do for a human being is just listen. Because only they know what is right for themselves. And if you let a person, and you just listen and you don't say anything at all, if you let a person talk long enough, they will come up with a solution. And that's loving. Because a lot of times we want to say something, do, like give feedback, whatever, interfere. But if you just listen and let them talk long enough, they will get their answer.
And I think we often talk about active listening, but I think the question is, are we doing deep listening? And are we doing, and often what I say when I'm with whoever I'm working with, am I coming from open-hearted, non-judgmental curiosity? Does my curiosity guide the conversation?
Yeah, I deal with executives. Those are my clients. Who are way busy. They're way too busy to do. I don't know. What I've found is this. One is keep it simple. We're in such a complex world right now, and it's getting more complex all the time. And the complexity allows us to go down rabbit holes and use that as an excuse for not getting to the reality, to the root. Right? Your comment about curiosity. Here's what I learned. If I come from a place of curiosity and non-judgment, I'm going to connect much more with the individual. And that gives permission for the individual to share with me his or her curiosity and what's deep down in them. So when I approach these executives who know everything, they know everything. I only have to give them 10 minutes of curiosity, and all of a sudden, they go to places they've never been before. Because they've been waiting to be asked curious questions.
So can I add an addendum to what you're saying, though? I think where we are right now is we think of each other often in boxes and monoliths. And we're thinking monolithically of this group of men, women. And what I find is, if we can make our concepts simple for people to understand the complexity, but the flip side is that if we can take the time to see the complexity in the person, that often is where I find the movement happens.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I have a question that really didn't come up, but I want to put it out in the room. So in these times right now where I judge that women's autonomy rights are being questioned and that there are many people who wish to take them away, what can you offer around deepening those relationships so that we listen to each other and accept each other's needs? And
So this work is never about men. This work is about humanity. Humanity. And so when we think about our humanity, and we think about, I often think when I think about polarization, one of our most greatest polarized divides globally is gender. So one thing you can't take yourself out of the equation. We all have a connection to gender. So I would often say, how do we create the spaces for people to have the safety to not have to code switch and be themselves, to do the inner work? Then the next layer is to come together in community, in a broader community. When we have to do it with men, then the next step is to build bridges across gender, within the binary and beyond the binary. And then we start coming into how do we solve the problems of humanity together. That's the frame I look at it. And if you would indulge me, this is my one plug, here's my book, Warrior Compassion. But one of the things I did in my book is I wrote a prayer for every section. And I want to share a prayer that I wrote. So in my seminary, we had a sacred goddess class. And in that sacred goddess class, we had to see which goddess came to us. And for me, it was Venus and Aphrodite. Right? So I wrote a prayer to Aphrodite on behalf of all men. Can I share it? And I'm going to use the language divine creator. Use whatever you want. All right, I'm at that age where I have to. All right. A man's prayer for love and connection. A prayer to Aphrodite on behalf of all men. Goddess of love, passion, and grace, what can you teach men about love? What becomes possible when we can access your full feminine expression of love, desire, and connection? Share with men your wisdom and guidance to access the full transforming power of love. Let the light of your love shine on each man so that he can feel your healing and transforming power. Break down the walls that inhibit our hearts from expressing freely and connecting deeply. Remove the shame and guilt of sexuality and the fear of love and intimacy that inhibits us as men. Show us how love becomes the life force for our full emotional and creative expression. Help us untether love, sex, and intimacy in healthy, fulfilling ways that make us whole. Bring us to a place of open-heartedness, compassion, and deeper connection in our full expression of love and in all of our relationships. Let the full expression of men's access to love bring light and healing to all women and those beyond the binary. And the relationships between men and women be forever healed. Create new possibilities in healing the world when love is the life force illuminating men and women as they live into their full expression and embrace the transforming power of love. And so it is. And that's our time.
Amen.
Thank you all.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, man.
That was wonderful.